Hello and welcome to Andy's Cornish Creations. In this video I'm going to be taking this piece of Iroko and turn it into a very simple bowl. Here you can see I'm just going corner to corner to find the centre of the piece, and I'm going to draw a circle on there. And I'm going to cut the corners off the block with my bandsaw. If you don't have a bandsaw, you can just use a handsaw and cut those corners off, just to make it a bit easier when you start turning. I will be using a chuck for this turning, and this is the woodworm screw, or the worm screw, and the drill bit that I'm using is just it's the same size as the shank on the screw, but not and smaller than the thread, and the depth is just slightly deeper than the screw. So I've taken the corners off with the bandsaw, the holes in, it's ready to go. I've got my chuck ready, and I've got my closing it down to just not quite fully closed up, and that's where it's at its optimum round, and I'm setting my calipers to that diameter. The idea being that I leave the tenon on the bottom of the bowl, and that's the diameter that it's going to be. Here I'm putting the worm screw in and tightening it up slowly, giving it a little wiggle so that it tightens up as much as it can, and then at the last minute pull it outwards. Because if you leave it stuck in, it could pull out on its own and leave the piece of wood loose. And then screw the piece onto the worm screw. I'll lock up the head with that. Just lock the headstock up. There you go, and give it a little final tighten, and there it's ready to go. I still pull up my tailstock. Whenever I can, I will use tailstock support. And there I've got my tool rest at an angle, so I can take the. I'm going to be turning the bottom, the base of the bowl. And here I've got a 1/2 inch bowl gouge. I'm starting to take the corner off. Stop the piece, move the tool rest closer, and start again. You don't want to be hanging the chisel too far over the tool rest. Keep it close. Just working it down. It'll be a very simple shape, this, and I'm just taking it down so that it's close to that diameter that I've just showed you there with the calipers, which will be the tenon, and as I'm leaving the tenon on, it will eventually be the foot of the bowl. This is an ideal bowl for a fairly new wood turner, so long as they have a chuck. If you haven't yet got a chuck, you've got to work out how to do it with a faceplate, but it's a bit of a different kettle of fish. Here I'm using the calipers, and I'm just pointing to the left hand side, because I'm digging in with that left hand side where my finger is, and the other side is left away from the wood, but just using it as to line up the two rings, two lines. Here I've got a scraper. It's an old mortise tenon chisel, and I'm just taking it down to create the tenon. And it's a straight-sided tenon, this, because the inside of my jaws are straight. I've been pulled up on this a couple of times by creating a dovetail when it didn't need one, but there I've just lowered the tool rest because the chisel, when held horizontally, should line up with the centre of the bowl. And you can see there it does. And I'm just flattening it off, and I will leave it slightly concave, so slightly hollow, just so that it sits on the edges and not in the centre. And there I'm using the corner of that same chisel just to create 3 rings, just as a design feature, because that is the finished surface, and we want it to look nice, even the bottom, because people do tend to turn it over and have a look what's down there. Here, back onto the bowl gouge, and I'm just finalising the design. So I'm leaving a shoulder there for the chuck to sit against, and then bringing it around and up with a nice gently flowing shape, but at the same time keeping it very simple. And that's pretty much it. Here I'm getting my tungsten carbide tipped chisel, just to show you that if you haven't got a bowl gouge and you've got carbide tools, exactly the same process, and just as easy. Now I'm starting to sand, starting with an 80 grit, and I'm working it down, getting it nice and smooth, and I've got a bit of tear out on the end grain on this, and it's important with that 80 grit to get that right down and get it smooth before you move on to the next grit. I've gone through the grits now, and I'm on to 320, and we got quite a nice finish. You can just see it starting to shine a little bit there. And you see there, I've just spotted a bit of a line. I'm not sure what it is, but it's something that's stuck in there, and I don't want to go back through the grits to get it out. So I thought maybe a little alteration. So I've got that tenon chisel, and I'm just cutting in a little line with the corner of that chisel, and that should lose the little fault in the wood there, and also create a interesting little design. A good way of getting around a problem. Just remember, there's no such thing as a problem, only opportunity for a solution. Got my abrasive paste, and rub that on all over. I do use a rag for applying my paste and polishers, but I'm always very careful not to make the rag too big, and to make sure that if it gets caught it'll just pull out without wrapping around my fingers. The speed is about 800 here. I'm only really using 3 speeds, so if I'm sanding it'll be 400, polishing it'll be 800 to apply it, and maybe going up to 1200, which I've just done there, just to heat up the wax and for buffing up and what have you. And there you see we've got a decent enough shine. This Iroko doesn't shine up terribly well. It doesn't take a really good polish, but it's still a nice sheen. And now I'm applying my homemade wood wax just to protect the surface. And again, turn the speed up a bit to get a bit of heat into it. Remember the bottom and the grooves. Now I've got some paper towel and just giving it just removing the excess paste and giving it a bit of a buff up. And with that, that's the base and underside of the bowl completed. Nice and simple. Lock up the headstock, do a bit of grunting to take it off, and then take out the worm screw. And pop it in, and it should tighten up. Well, it's just leaving just jaws slightly open, which is sort of at the optimum roundness. And that way they don't mark the little tenon on the bottom, because hopefully we won't be touching that again, and we don't want to cut into it with the jaws. Now back onto the 1/2 inch bowl gouge, and I'm just going to tidy up, flatten up that top edge. And hopefully I'll remember that you can't see this very well, so I'll change the camera slightly. There you go. And as you see, I've still got the tailstock in place. It will get in the way, but it's surprising how much you can do with the tailstock still there. And while you're doing this outside edge, you're putting a lot of sort of lateral force on the bowl, and I just find it a little bit safer to have that tailstock support, especially with a relatively small tenon on the bottom holding it in place. Yeah, I'm back onto my tungsten carbide tipped chisel. I do like this chisel just for finishing the bowls off. I just find it easier than the bowl gouge. It's not exactly a traditional tool, but hey, it works for me. And I'm trying to get a little bit under a 1/4 inch walls. You can hear it already, it's starting to sound thinner. I'm just trying to follow the shape of the outside on the inside. I'm just using the calipers to see if it's roughly the same, or it needs a little bit more. Also, this is a homemade gouge, and the shank and the handle are really long, so it's really good for reaching into the bottom of that bowl. Here's a different angle. You can see I'm getting quite well down there, and I've still got tailstock support, so it's nice and safe, and yet I've got a good part of the inside of the bowl turned. Right, I've taken this tailstock support away, and now I'm just going to remove that centre. There, just continuing to remove that centre with the tungsten carbide tool. You can do it with a bowl gouge, of course. This is just my preferred method. I quite like using the bowl gouge on the outside, but when it comes to the inside, I do like this tool. So here I'll just check the depth, have a feel, see how thick the bottom is. I'm not going to go too thin on the bottom. It's not necessary on this one, but the walls are pretty even. So I'm more interested in the just getting a nice shape on the inside. Just checked, see what it feels like. Obviously there were a little bit of a ridge there. Just some light cuts just to even it out. I've just rounded off that edge slightly. And I think that should be good to go. So on with the sanding, starting with an 80 grit again, and just to reiterate, the sanding down of this first grit is the most important one. We need to get rid of the tear out, which you will get on these bowls, because there's an end grain there that generally does need a fair bit of sanding out. There I'm down to 320 grit, and again I've got my abrasive paste. I'm speeding this up to 4 times because we've seen it before on the outside. Ooh, goodness me, a very loud reminder to subscribe and ring the notification bell, and to share and to like. Thank you. So there, just applied the wood wax and just giving it a buff up, exactly the same as we did on the outside. And that's about it. It's a nice simple bowl, this one, and yet it looks, it's really quite elegant. I think it's a really simple form that kind of works, and I do like the foot on the bottom, but I'll probably repeat all that again in a couple of minutes when I do the outro. So I'll leave you over, and any second now I will be taking over again. Okay, so there we have it. A really simple little bowl. A tenon on the bottom with a little design underneath just to make it look nice. And the beauty of this tenon is that you can turn the entire bottom of the bowl and finish it, and when you turn it round to do the hollowing, you don't have to go back and turn the tenon off, because it creates a lovely little foot that's a feature rather than something that you have to get rid of, and I quite like the look of that. And it's a very simple design, simple shape, nice thin walls, and hollowed out in the middle. This is a piece of Iroko, and it's not the greatest wood to finish off, but it's taken it's taken a nice shine, and with the abrasive paste and the wood wax, and yeah. Main things to remember. I did have a little problem there where I got this little piece that I couldn't sand out, a little line, and I'm not sure what it was, but I got rid of it with this groove. There's always a way around these things. The inside, the end grain was a bit tricky, but you've got to be persistent, especially with that first grit. I started this off with an 80 grit, and you've got to make sure that you get that sort of end grain roughness away before you move up the grits, and then every time you move up the grit, make sure that you take the lines out of the previous grit. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up, or is it that one? If you didn't enjoy it, then why are you still watching this? Because there's better things to do. Hopefully you can share, and if you can leave a comment, that's great. I read all the comments. I struggle to reply to them all sometimes, but I try my best, and I do try to answer any questions that anybody asks. So yeah, if you haven't subscribed, then there's a little picture of me at the end. You can click on that, and that takes you to the subscribe, and there's also a subscribe in the just underneath the video where the description is. And when you do subscribe, click on the little notification bell, and that will let you know when my next video is up. And if you would like to look at some of my old videos, there's loads there, so check out some of my old stuff. And it's a range of stuff, from wood turning to wood carving, and even a little bit of stone carving, so lots of stuff out there. Right, anyway, that's enough waffling. My name's Andy Paramore, this is Andy's Cornish Creations. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will see you on the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.